Now, before we get to the practicalities of investing in the game on theme, let's call it that, let's set the scene with a man who's at the helm of a firm that oversees $1.8 billion worth of investments. He's backed gaming and esports for quite some time, and he's now investing in online gambling in a big way. Ross Gerber from Gerber Kawasaki joined Koshi just a short time ago.
Ross, always great to catch up. Now, in terms of the online gaming sector, I reckon most Australians are shocked to hear that it used to be illegal up until recently in the United States. How big is the market going to be?
Well, that's, I think, part of the big question, because Americans have been gambling online. They've just been doing it illegally. And, you know, when I was a kid, I spent some time in Australia. And when I got there, that was one of the things that shocked me the most was cane toad betting in the fever for gambling in Australia. And so, like, when you think about that in America, which we're a big gambling culture as well, the opportunity is potentially limitless. And I was just tweeting, the numbers for September were just huge for downloads of new gambling apps.
So give us an indication of those numbers.
So you have the sort of leader of the pack, and the one that's really making waves with DraftKings with their bid for Entain to really take the other half of BetMGM and dominate the market. So DraftKings is making a play to be the global dominant player if they can take Entain with the offer of $20 billion. So we'll see if this happens, because it would really shake up the landscape. Secondly, you have Paddy Power, another company that's not based in the United States, but owns FanDuel, which is number 2. And then behind that is BetMGM and Caesars, which have about 12% of the downloads in the last month. So they each have a nice market share. And that's why I think we're really starting to see winners and losers in this space. And so DraftKings is making their move.
Right. Because we have a lot of Australian listed stocks who have raised a lot of money in the last 12 months to take on the American market. How competitive is it going to be? Following on for your winners and losers, what's it going to take to be a winner?
Well, this is really, I think, sort of a gold rush mentality where you get so much investment in an area where there's so much opportunity, but yet it's a very fragmented market and in some ways oversaturated, because the apps don't really differentiate themselves that much, because essentially, you're just betting on a game. So the companies that we're betting on, like MGM, which is our holding in my fund GK and with my clients, is that the online casinos supplement the regular casinos and the overall gambling experience for a user of the app, but also in real life. So when you go to Vegas, you're going to go maybe to a Raiders game now with MGM, stay at the MGM hotels, one of the many. They just took over the Cosmo, which is one of the best hotels in Vegas. And then you can go and gamble in Nevada, but maybe in your home state on the same app, and get credits for everything that you're doing, because that's really what drives gambling is getting something for losing money, because we all know that most people lose money gambling. And so you want great comps. And I think that's really going to separate the winners from the losers, is what you get when you lose.
Massive databases as well that you, as you're saying, you can mine constantly. But it's a state-by-state regulated decision, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the theme that we play in my fund and at my firm, is that the things that used to be illegal is a very cumbersome process. So there's 2 areas we're investing in: online gambling and cannabis, which is also doing the same thing, state by state, getting approved and then going through this like myriad of legal issues to get operating. Gambling's actually had it easier than cannabis, but cannabis, I think, is potentially even a bigger market. So, both are great, and we're invested in both. And I think online gambling over time is a great place for investors.
Okay. So from the theme I'm getting here is that if you want to be successful in this online gaming market, it's about the partnerships you build. For example, here we have PointsBet building a partnership with NBC to be their chosen app for NBC Sports. We've got another stock in the wings that is building up to to float in the near future called Pickle Bet, which will focus on online sports gaming, and has done a deal with Caesars. So it's who you go into collaboration with could be a turning point.
Oh, absolutely. And so you have your media properties and actually the leagues themselves making partnerships, because they have broadcast rights, and it's also for ad dollars too, because these companies are spending huge amounts on advertising. So it's like, kind of like this like mutually beneficial cycle of like DraftKings, let's say, buying ads on, ESPN, and then ESPN leveraging that to get paid by DraftKings too for information or leads, basically, for new gamblers. So, when you think about what's really happening now, it's massive, because the leagues themselves used to be against gambling, in fact, and really went out of their ways to prevent gambling. And now they're all in with gambling because they realize it actually increases revenues to the league substantially and interest in sports. So what we're seeing is a sort of like confluence of all these forces making a huge impact with huge opportunities. But I think ultimately we'll see a lot of consolidation and just a few real winners,
Yeah. So it's almost going to be like the .com boom back in the early 2000s. There's going to be a massive
but these companies
rush.
make money. But these companies make money. Gambling's good,
But the theme is stick with the sector leaders right from the start.
Yeah, so I think many of these players will essentially sell themselves because they won't be able to make money, and then they'll build up either like a list or good data that they could sell to, let's say, Paddy Power or somebody. But I think we already know who the main players are. That's how we're investing, and you can do it through an ETF like BETZ that's focused on just online sports betting, or my ETF GK, which also has this as a focus, one of the focuses in my ETF. So investors can get exposure in many ways, but I do recommend the leaders because there's obviously a lot of risk in an emerging market like this.
Speaking of your ETF, it's sort of an ETF for all the stocks that are in the naughty corner in terms of the ESG theme that's being played out globally at the moment. So it's but how do you choose which stocks, and do you have an issue with the ESG sort of filter that a lot of investors are putting on their strategies at the moment?
Well, I think there's no more confusing filter than how you define ESG. In fact, we define our fund as very ESG because, we don't necessarily want to make moral judgments based off people's religious belief systems. So a lot of belief systems that are based around religion isn't necessarily the best belief system. So like you might decide something's morally bad. But for example, we invest in climate. 15% plus of the fund is investing in climate change. What we're trying to do is make huge change in transportation and energy for climate. We also push issues like that are very important to us, like gender equality and just equality in general. And even among our holdings, we have issues, and we speak out on behalf of shareholders against management to try to make things right. So we're an active ETF. So I actually say stuff every day, like I was just tweeting. So I think we're probably more ESG than however you want to define it, because most fund managers are either passive investments where they just support management no matter what they do, and they're invested in fossil fuels and many other places. And then the rest of them don't say anything anyway. So, we're really trying to make change. And I don't think, things like cannabis, where many people have suffered from being arrested based off their race, using cannabis laws, like this is a huge plus in the United States, making cannabis legal, and it's something that needs to be done. So I think morality is a tough thing to argue about, but we think we're pushing the right things, and some of the things are fun, and maybe some people consider us sin.
Yeah. In terms of the online gaming area, there are the obvious investments. But what about the ripple effect on app developers or gamer developers? Is that going to hold on to the coattails?
Well, I think across the board, you have this confluence of gaming and like gambling, and that's merging too. So I actually see a lot more potential with actually gambling on gaming, which I think is coming at some point for adults, um, and so like when you think about the app ecosystem world, we were just doing a podcast on the metaverse where we did the podcast in the metaverse using Oculuses, where somebody in Australia and somebody in the United States could just like play cards in the metaverse and bet on that and have your avatar and just play like real cards. You know, the potential in technology today in communications and biotechnology is really limitless, and that's why we're investing aggressively in these areas. Is we're incredibly bullish about what innovations we're going to see, whether it be in entertainment or healthcare, in the use of really technology, AI, and the advanced computing powers of chips today. So we're very bullish over the next decade, and that's why I started a fund.
Yep. How do you start identifying the stocks? Because they go through a program, a set sort of blueprint, if you like. They start out in that venture capital space and build up products, start testing, and then eventually list. Do you get involved back in that early pre-IPO stage? Is that where you start to identify ventures for the future?
Yeah, I'm fortunately like kind of right in the mix here in Southern California. My next door neighbor, Snapchat. So when you think about when I go out to lunch, who's around, like we have access to so much innovation that's happening, that's affecting the world globally here in California. So tremendous amounts of innovation, whether it be in cryptocurrencies or technology, or social media. And so, or entertainment. So we have this all kind of happening around, and that's kind of the edge that I have is knowing what's happening in the market with pre-stage companies, watching the evolution of different markets, especially in things like entertainment and gaming and things like this, where we just have this sort of bird's eye view of what's happening in the world. And I talk about it every day. That's why I'm in the media talking about what we see happening with like tremendously cool things that, whether it be VR or the metaverse, or whether it be online gambling and casinos and sports, which, are really fun to follow and invest in. So there's huge opportunities out there. And I do think it's a huge advantage being sort of in the center of that.
Because not only have you seen the successes, you've seen the failures as well. The pre-IPOs that don't really make it. How has that affected your investment filter? Are there any common themes that you look out for success in a new technology or a new venture?
Yeah, I did, invest and live through, as a professional investor.com, boom and bust. So I was lucky enough on the boom side, but when that went on, I learned a lot of lessons that I think I am very much translating to use today, which is number one, there are many great products that will never make money. I think of Uber, for example, which is still struggling to make money. It's not that Uber doesn't have a huge utility, but it's just like not a great business model. And it reminds me of homegrocer.com, So like, just because a technology is great and cool doesn't mean it's profitable. So one of the first things we look at is what is the margin on this business, and do they have to keep funding tons of advertising to get users, but then there's no user loyalty. So that's a big problem with a lot of technologies. So what we really look for are really things that are sticky. And that's why we like things like video games or online gambling, or, for example, consumer products like made by Apple, which is been one of my largest investments for my entire life. So, people, you got to know what people are doing. And if you invest around what people are doing, and then those are really profitable businesses, my wife's in the beauty business. It's very profitable. The fashion business in a lot of ways is similar, but it's not really profitable. And so it's like you could have two businesses that are both really vibrant, but one could be substantially more profitable than the other. And that's, I think, one of the biggest criteria I think about the future when I'm making an investment in a technology.
And how big a part does the founder play?
The founder plays a huge part in every investment that we make, because I don't really think of a company as like this sort of number on a screen. I think of the company as the people running it. and the products and services that they're producing. So like for me, I use the products, I test everything, I talk to customer service, I meet the CEOs, we call it boots on the ground research, which is really the fundamental part of where we build our investment theses from, is actually this interaction. So I do know the CEOs of many of the companies that I'm invested in, and I provide advice actively to try to help those companies and help them, achieve their goals and help them in the stock market and make right decisions. And that can be as big of a company as Tesla or as small as a company as Arcimoto. There's many CEOs like Tim Cook, who's been ignoring me for several decades, but if he would have listened to my advice, he'd own a piece of Netflix and Tesla. But like some CEOs are really open to shareholders and shareholder activism and really are engaged, like Elon. And other, CEOs just put out the tweets that the PR people tell them to, like Tim Cook. And that's okay, but I prefer the relationships where we really know the people involved, because that's, really what drives a business.
Ross, always great to catch up. Appreciate your time. Just quickly, volatility in the market at the moment. Yeah. Does it make you nervous? Are you readying for the opportunity?
Yeah, I don't get nervous when governments around the world just print money and give it away. I mean, what you have to worry about is interest rates. And so that's the only thing we're watching. And the Fed has made it very clear they're not raising rates till, at least a year from now. So, we're going to see volatility because everything's expensive. All assets are, but we're going to continue to see inflation in assets and in prices for some time. And it's a sign of a great economy here in the United States. Things are booming here in California. I have never seen anything like it. It's insane, like you guys will get there, Australia, get some Moderna, take your shot. And I'm telling you, it's like party city out here. So people are spending a ton of money, and it feels like the roaring 20s have begun.